Dear listeners, I welcome you to my channel. If you like my work, please subscribe to the channel, like this video and write a comment. This helps the video to promote and motivates you to try harder every day. If you want to support the channel financially, the link is in the description and in the profile header. Thank you. Enjoy listening. The streets of Dublin were alive with the vibrant energy of St. Patrick's Day. Emerald green banners hung from every lamppost, and the air buzzed with the sound of laughter, music, and the distant echoes of bagpipes. Tourists and locals alike filled the cobbled streets, their faces painted with shamrocks, their hands clutching pints of Guinness. The atmosphere was intoxicating, a whirlwind of joy and tradition. Among the sea of revelers was a group of 5 friends: Emily, Jack, Samantha, Ryan, and Luke. They had traveled from London to experience the legendary Irish festivities firsthand. Emily, the historian of the group, had planned their itinerary meticulously, ensuring they would visit the most famous landmarks, attend the grand parade, and, of course, indulge in the best Irish pubs the city had to offer. "This is exactly how I imagined it," Emily exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with excitement as she took in the lively scene. "Yeah, except I thought there'd be more leprechauns handing out gold," Ryan joked, nudging Luke with his elbow. "Maybe you have to catch one first," Luke smirked, raising his beer in a mock toast to our successful leprechaun hunt. As they made their way through the crowded streets, a peculiar sight caught Emily's attention. An elderly man sat on a worn wooden stool near an alleyway, his long, gnarled fingers tracing patterns in the air as he whispered to himself. His eyes, an unsettling shade of green, flickered toward the group, and for a moment, Emily felt as if he was looking straight through her. "Guys, look at him," she said, pointing subtly. "He seems out of place." Jack, ever the skeptic, chuckled. "Come on, Em. It's just an old man enjoying the holiday in his own way." But as they passed, the old man's lips moved, his voice rasping like wind through dead leaves. "Beware the gold you do not earn. The cursed ones walk tonight." Samantha shivered. Did he just? Creepy old men spouting nonsense? "Classic holiday ambience," Ryan quipped, though his fingers twitched slightly as he adjusted his scarf. They laughed it off and continued their evening, weaving through the bustling streets until they reached O'Malley's, a famous pub tucked away in a quieter corner of the city. The interior was a comforting contrast to the chaotic streets, with warm lighting, wooden beams, and the smell of roasted meat and aged whiskey filling the air. "Now this is the real Irish experience," Jack said as they found a booth near the fireplace. Their drinks arrived, and with the first clink of glasses, the tension from the encounter with the old man faded. They fell into easy conversation, sharing stories, making toasts, and reveling in the atmosphere. But even as the evening wore on, Emily couldn't shake the old man's words from her mind. "Hey," she said, leaning in. "Do you guys know the real legend of the leprechaun?" "You mean the one where they hoard gold and dance around rainbows?" Luke said, grinning. Emily shook her head. "That's the sanitized version. The original stories were much darker. They weren't just mischievous tricksters, they were vengeful. If you stole from them, even by accident, they would haunt you until they got their treasure back, or took something even more valuable." A hush settled over the table. Outside, the sound of celebration continued, but for a moment it felt distant, muffled. Then Ryan broke the silence with a laugh. "Come on, Em. We're here to have fun, not get spooked by old folklore." Emily forced a smile, but as the night stretched on, a strange unease clung to her. Maybe it was the drink, or maybe it was the way the old man's voice seemed to echo in her mind. "Beware the gold you do not earn." Unbeknownst to her, at that very moment, Luke's fingers brushed against something in his pocket, something he didn't remember picking up. A small, ancient-looking gold coin. The morning after the celebration, Dublin was a stark contrast to the night before. The vibrant energy of St. Patrick's Day had given way to the quiet stillness of dawn. The streets, littered with confetti and discarded beer cups, bore the remnants of a city that had indulged in revelry until exhaustion. Luke awoke with a start, his head pounding as if someone were hammering on his skull from the inside. He sat up on the creaky bed of their rented apartment, blinking away the hazy remnants of a dream that had left a gnawing unease in his gut. Flashes of eerie green light, distorted laughter, and the sensation of something cold brushing against his skin replayed in his mind. He ran a hand through his hair and felt something unfamiliar in his pocket. Pulling it out, his stomach twisted into a knot. It was the same gold coin from the night before, the one he had no memory of picking up. Its surface was smooth yet unnaturally cold, and strange, intricate patterns covered its face. The air in the room felt heavier, as if the very walls were leaning in to watch him. A knock at his door startled him. "Luke, wake up. We're grabbing breakfast," Emily called. Shaking off his unease, he stuffed the coin back into his pocket and forced a casual tone. Yeah, I'm coming." Downstairs, the rest of the group was already gathered around a small wooden table at a cozy cafe. The scent of fresh pastries and coffee filled the air, but despite the comforting atmosphere, Luke couldn't shake the sensation that something was off. "You look like hell," Samantha teased as he slumped into a chair. "Thanks," Luke muttered, rubbing his temples. "No, seriously," Emily added, leaning in. "Did you have nightmares or something? You look pale." Luke hesitated. "Yeah, I guess. Just weird dreams. Nothing major." "We all slept terribly," Jack chimed in, stirring his tea absent-mindedly. "I kept hearing whispers. Thought it was the wind at first, but it sounded like voices." Ryan scoffed. "Come on, man. We partied hard. We're just hungover. Dublin's got ghosts now?" Emily bit her lip. "It's just odd, though. I swear I heard something in our room, too. Like footsteps. But every time I turned on the light, nothing was there." A heavy silence settled over the table. The jovial energy from the previous night was gone, replaced by a growing discomfort none of them wanted to acknowledge outright. Trying to shake the tension, Samantha pulled out her phone. "Okay, let's change the subject. What's on today's agenda?" "I was thinking we could visit that old castle ruin outside the city. Supposedly haunted, perfect for a thrill-seeking historian, right, Em?" Emily perked up slightly. "That actually sounds amazing. Kilkenny Castle isn't too far, and it's got a history of strange occurrences." Luke nodded along, but his mind kept drifting back to the coin burning cold against his thigh. He decided against mentioning it. It was just a trinket, right? The train ride to Kilkenny was uneventful, but the closer they got, the more the landscape seemed to change. Rolling green hills stretched endlessly, and the sky, once bright and clear, turned a muted gray. The castle itself loomed in the distance, an imposing silhouette against the cloudy backdrop. As they stepped off the train and made their way toward the site, Emily read aloud from a travel guide. Kilkenny Castle dates back to the 12th century. It was said to be built on land once inhabited by the Tuatha Dé Danann, ancient beings of Irish folklore. Some say that the land still carries echoes of their presence. "Echoes?" Luke asked, shifting uncomfortably. Emily smirked. "Whispers, shadows, strange occurrences. You know, the usual ghost story stuff." Ryan rolled his eyes. Tourist traps love this kind of nonsense. But as they stepped through the castle's grand entrance, an uneasy sensation settled over them. The air was colder inside, thick with a musty dampness. Their footsteps echoed unnaturally loud against the stone floor. A tour guide, a woman in her late 50s with sharp blue eyes, greeted them. "Welcome to Kilkenny Castle. You're in for quite the experience today." Something in the way she said it sent a shiver down Luke's spine. He instinctively reached into his pocket, fingers brushing against the coin. And then, a flicker. Just for a moment. The guide's face twisted. Her eyes darkened, her skin wrinkling as if aging in fast forward. But in the blink of an eye, she was back to normal, smiling as if nothing had happened. Luke swallowed hard. Maybe it was just exhaustion. Or maybe it was something else entirely. And then, deep in the halls of the castle, a whisper floated through the air. A laugh. Low, chilling, inhuman. Something was watching them. The cold air inside Kilkenny Castle felt heavier, pressing against their skin like unseen hands. Luke tried to shake off the unease creeping up his spine, but the sensation wouldn't leave. The whisper, if it had been real, had seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The tour guide led them deeper into the castle, her voice steady and practiced as she recited facts about the ancient structure. This castle has withstood centuries of history. It has seen wars, betrayals, and whispers of curses passed down through generations. Some say that the spirits of those wronged here never truly left. Emily, always eager to explore folklore, leaned in. What kind of curses? The guy hesitated, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she chuckled softly. Ah, stories to scare the tourists. They say that taking something from this land, anything, even the smallest trinket, angers the ones who rest here. The old tales claim that the Tuatha De Danann left behind guardians, beings that protect what remains of their domain. Those who steal from them are said to be reclaimed. Luke stiffened. His fingers instinctively brushed against the coin in his pocket, its surface ice cold. Oh, come on, Ryan scoffed. This is just another campfire ghost story. No one really believes that. But the guide's expression darkened. Some do. And some who laughed before are no longer here to laugh again. The words sent a chill through the group. They exchanged uneasy glances but continued following the tour through the castle halls. Luke could feel something lingering in the shadows, something watching. As they moved through the dimly lit corridors, Jack suddenly stopped. Did you hear that? The group paused. Silence. Jack, quit messing around, Samantha said, crossing her arms. No, seriously. His voice was hushed, urgent. I heard footsteps. Right behind us. Emily turned back, scanning the empty hallway. The shadows seemed to stretch, darker than before. The tour guide was already walking ahead, unaware of their hesitation. Luke's heart pounded. He wanted to dismiss it, to chalk it up to paranoia, but the whispers earlier, the coin in his pocket. The tension was becoming unbearable. They continued on, but the castle felt different now. The walls seemed narrower, the air thicker. Every so often, Luke caught movement in the corner of his eye, fleeting figures that vanished when he turned his head. The others were sensing it too. Samantha clung to Emily's arm, her bravado slipping. Even Ryan had stopped making sarcastic remarks. Then, the lights flickered. For a split second, the hallway was plunged into near darkness. And in that instant, Luke saw something, a shadow, impossibly tall, with glowing green eyes staring directly at him from the end of the corridor. When the lights flickered back, it was gone. His breathing was ragged. Did anyone see that? Jack nodded slowly, his face pale. Yeah. We need to get out of here. But when they turned to retrace their steps, the hallway behind them was no longer the same. The door they had come through was gone. What the hell? Samantha whispered. That's not possible. We just came from there. Panic set in. Luke clenched his fists. The coin in his pocket felt heavier, almost as if it was pulsing against his skin. His mind raced. The legend. The curse. Had he really taken something that wasn't his? Was that why this was happening? A gust of cold air rushed past them, carrying with it the unmistakable sound of laughter, low, guttural, inhuman. The castle was no longer just a relic of history. It was alive. And it wanted something from them. The laughter faded, but its echoes lingered in the damp air of the stone corridor. The group stood frozen, their breath shallow, their bodies tense. The passage they had just come through was gone. Where there should have been an open archway leading back, there was now only an unbroken stretch of cold, ancient stone. Emily was the first to break the silence. This isn't possible. Her voice trembled, but she fought to keep her composure. Jack ran his hands along the wall, pressing against the stones as if trying to find some secret mechanism. Maybe there's a hidden door or something? This place is old. There could be passages we don't know about. Ryan let out a sharp, nervous laugh. Or maybe we're just freaking out over nothing. Maybe we took a wrong turn? Samantha shook her head. No, Ryan. I remember. We came through here. That door was open. Luke's fingers curled around the coin in his pocket. It felt heavier than before, like a weight dragging him down. His skin prickled, an icy sensation crawling up his arm. He didn't want to believe it, didn't want to acknowledge the fear creeping into his bones, but deep down, he knew. Something was very wrong. The guide, who had been leading the tour just moments ago, was nowhere to be seen. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air. The only sound was the distant dripping of water, a slow, rhythmic pulse that seemed to echo from the very walls themselves. "Okay," Emily said, exhaling sharply. "We stick together. We find another way out. No one wanders off alone." They turned and began walking, their footsteps muffled against the stone floor. The hallway stretched endlessly ahead, dimly lit by flickering torches mounted on the walls. The further they walked, the more the atmosphere changed. The air grew denser, the temperature colder, and the silence heavier, as though the very castle was watching, waiting. Then, Jack stopped again. "Wait. No. No, no, no. This isn't right." Luke looked up, his heart sinking. They had been walking in a straight line, moving forward, trying to find another exit. And yet, impossibly, they were back where they started. The same unbroken stone wall stood before them. "That's not possible." Samantha's voice rose in pitch, panic breaking through. "We didn't turn around. We didn't." Emily's breathing quickened. "It's shifting. The castle. It's changing." Ryan slammed his fist against the wall. "This is bullshit. This is some stupid trick. It has to be." But Luke wasn't listening. He could feel something moving. Not around them, inside them. A pressure, a whispering hum just beneath his skin. The coin in his pocket throbbed like a second heartbeat. And then the whispering began. It was soft at first, like a breeze through dead leaves, a language just beyond understanding. The words slithered into his mind, curling around his thoughts, burrowing into his chest. "Luke," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. "Do you hear it?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I hear it." The others looked at them in confusion, their eyes darting around the empty corridor. "Hear what?" Jack asked, his voice tight. Luke opened his mouth to answer, but the whispering grew louder. This time, the others heard it too. It came from everywhere at once. A chorus of voices, overlapping, murmuring, calling. Then, all at once, they stopped. And the torches went out. The darkness was absolute. It swallowed them whole, thick and suffocating. A gust of freezing wind rushed past them, bringing with it the unmistakable scent of damp earth and decay. Samantha screamed. Something moved in the dark. A scraping sound, slow and deliberate. Heavy footsteps that did not belong to any of them. Luke fumbled in his pocket, his fingers closing around the coin. It was burning now, searing his skin, but he didn't let go. A single torch flared back to life, casting a feeble glow. And standing at the far end of the hallway was a figure. It was tall, impossibly tall, its body draped in tattered black robes that shimmered in and out of focus. Its face was obscured, but its eyes, glowing, eldritch green, bored into them with inhuman intensity. Luke felt his breath hitch. He couldn't move. None of them could. The figure raised a long, bony hand and pointed directly at Luke. Then, in a voice that was not a voice at all, it spoke. The debt must be paid. The torches all roared back to life at once, blinding them. When their vision cleared, the figure was gone. But the whispers remained. And somewhere, deep within the walls of the castle, something was laughing. The air in the corridor was thick with an unnatural silence, the kind that pressed down on their lungs and made every heartbeat feel deafening. The last words spoken by the apparition, if that's what it was, still hung in the air, echoing in Luke's mind like a prophecy carved into stone. The debt must be paid. Emily was the first to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. "Did everyone hear that?" Please tell me that wasn't just in my head." "We heard it," Jack muttered, his hands clenched into fists. "What the hell does it mean?" "Debt? What debt?" Luke's fingers unconsciously gripped the coin in his pocket. The weight of it seemed to grow heavier with each passing second, as if it was feeding off his fear. He swallowed hard but didn't speak. Something deep inside told him that this was about him, that the moment he found the coin, something had shifted. But saying it out loud felt like inviting whatever was hunting them even closer. Samantha's breathing was uneven. "We need to get out of here. Now." Ryan, who had been quiet longer than anyone expected, suddenly moved. "Screw this. We're not waiting around for whatever the hell that was to come back. There has to be another way out." Without waiting for agreement, he turned and started down the corridor. The others hesitated for only a moment before following, their footsteps quick and deliberate. The torches lining the walls flickered violently, as though the castle itself disapproved of their movement. As they walked, something became disturbingly clear. The castle had changed again. The long hallway that should have led them back to the main hall was now unfamiliar. The stone walls, once adorned with ancient tapestries and decorative sconces, were now barren, their surfaces rough and damp. The torches gave off little light, barely illuminating the pathway ahead. It was as if the castle was rewriting itself around them, trapping them in a maze with no escape. "This isn't right," Emily murmured. "We should have hit the stairwell by now." "Keep moving," Jack said, his voice strained. "Standing still isn't gonna help." Then the whispers returned. This time, they weren't distant or indistinct. They were close, too close. Right behind them. Right beside them. Luke turned his head sharply, his breath catching in his throat. Shadows moved along the walls, shifting like liquid darkness. They had no defined form, no faces, only eyes. Dozens of glowing green eyes flickered in and out of existence, watching, waiting. Samantha let out a strangled noise, covering her mouth with both hands as tears welled in her eyes. "They're everywhere." Then the lights went out again. Total darkness swallowed them, as if the entire world had been snuffed out. Luke could hear Emily's panicked breathing, Ryan's muttered curses, Jack's rapid footsteps as he tried to orient himself. Then came the scraping. A slow, deliberate sound, like nails dragging across stone. It came from ahead, then behind, then all around. Luke's heart pounded in his chest. He fumbled in his pocket, gripping the coin with all his strength, willing it to do something, anything, to stop this. And then, as if answering his unspoken plea, the coin flared with heat. A burning sensation spread through his palm, searing, unbearable. He yelped, jerking his hand away, but the glow from the coin illuminated the corridor for just a moment. And in that moment, they saw it. A figure, massive and hunched, its form shifting like smoke. Its eyes burned the same unnatural green as the coin, and its mouth, an unnatural, jagged gash in its otherwise featureless face, curled into something resembling a grin. "The debt must be paid," it whispered again, but this time, the voice wasn't distant. It was right next to Luke's ear. The torches exploded back to life, their flames stretching high against the ceiling. The shadows recoiled, retreating as if burned by the sudden burst of light. The figure was gone, but the air remained heavy with its presence. Luke clutched his hand to his chest, the skin still burning where the coin had been. He looked down and gasped. The coin had changed. Where once there had been intricate patterns, there was now an inscription. A single word, etched into the gold as though carved by an invisible hand. "Run." He didn't need to be told twice. "Go," he shouted, grabbing Emily's wrist and pulling her forward. The others followed without question, their feet slamming against the stone as they sprinted down the corridor, no longer caring where they were going, only that they needed to be anywhere but here. The castle seemed to fight against them, the walls shifting, the doorways vanishing before they could reach them. The whispers grew louder, rising into a cacophony of distorted voices, screaming, laughing, chanting in a language none of them understood. Then, finally, a door. It wasn't the grand entrance. It wasn't even familiar. But it was there, standing open, golden light spilling out into the darkness. "Move!" Jack yelled, shoving Ryan through first. Samantha and Emily followed, then Jack himself. Luke hesitated for only a second, glancing back just in time to see the shifting shadows swell, rising like a tidal wave, a mass of writhing figures reaching for him. He lunged through the doorway just as the shadows crashed forward. Then, silence. Luke hit the ground hard, the breath knocked from his lungs. He rolled onto his back, gasping, his vision swimming. They were outside. The night sky stretched above them, vast and endless, the stars burning cold and indifferent. The castle loomed behind them, silent and still, as if nothing had happened at all. "Holy shit," Ryan panted, doubling over. What?" Samantha was sobbing quietly, Emily hugging her tightly, whispering reassurances neither of them believed. Jack just stared at the castle, his face unreadable. Luke sat up slowly, his fingers instinctively reaching for his pocket. The coin was gone. And somewhere in the wind, almost too faint to hear, a voice whispered, "The debt is not yet paid." The cold night air felt like salvation against their skin, but none of them could shake the feeling that they had barely escaped with their lives. The castle loomed behind them, its towering walls silent and indifferent, as if it hadn't just tried to consume them. The whispers were gone, the shadows nowhere in sight. But something still felt wrong. Luke sat on the damp grass, trying to steady his breathing. His fingers instinctively reached for his pocket, but the coin was gone. He swallowed hard. It should have been a relief, but instead, it felt like an omen. Jack was the first to break the silence. "What the hell just happened?" Ryan let out a hollow laugh, running a shaking hand through his hair. "We almost died, that's what happened. We were inside a freaking nightmare. And now we're just out? Just like that?" "No," Emily murmured. "It's not over." Samantha shivered and hugged her arms around herself. "How do you know?" Emily looked at Luke, her eyes dark with unspoken fear. "Because we didn't pay the debt." The words sent a ripple of dread through the group. "Screw the debt," Jack snapped. "I don't care what that thing wanted. We're done with this place." Luke wasn't so sure. He stared at the castle, his pulse still pounding. The last thing he had heard, just before they escaped, was that whisper in the wind, "The debt is not yet paid." Something had followed them. Ryan stood abruptly. "We need to get out of here. Like, out of this town." "Agreed," Samantha said quickly. They hurried back toward the village, keeping close together, their footsteps quick and nervous. The streets were quiet, too quiet for a festival night. The usual laughter and music were gone, replaced by eerie stillness that made the hairs on Luke's arms rise. "Where is everyone?" Jack muttered. The streets should have been crowded with drunken revelers, but the town felt deserted. Pubs that had been overflowing hours ago were now dark, their doors locked. Windows were shuttered, lanterns extinguished. Then they saw the first figure. A man stood in the center of the street, his back to them. He didn't move, didn't speak. Just stood, rigid and unnatural, as if he had been placed there rather than walked there himself. "Hey!" Ryan called. "What's going on? Where is everyone?" The man turned. His eyes glowed an unnatural shade of green. Luke's breath caught in his throat. "No." The man's lips parted in a wide, unnatural grin. "The debt must be paid." Samantha screamed. More figures emerged from the alleyways, from doorways, from the darkness itself. Men, women, dozens of them. Their eyes burned the same eerie green, their bodies moving with jerky, unnatural motions like puppets with broken strings. "Run!" Emily shouted. They bolted down the street, dodging the figures that lurched toward them. The town had become a maze, each turn leading to more blank-faced people with glowing eyes, their eerie smiles never wavering. "We're trapped." Jack panted, slamming his fists against a locked door. "They're everywhere." Luke's mind raced. The coin was gone, but the curse wasn't. The debt wasn't settled. Emily grabbed his arm. "Luke." It was you. You took the coin. You started this. I know, he gasped. I know, but I don't have it anymore. Then what do they want? Samantha cried. A deep, guttural voice echoed through the streets, shaking the very ground beneath them. The debt must be paid, in blood. The townspeople surged forward. Luke grabbed the nearest object, a discarded lantern, and swung it at the closest figure. It shattered against the man's chest, but he didn't react. The glowing eyes remained fixed on Luke, unblinking, inhuman. We have to get back to the castle, Emily yelled. Ryan gaped at her. Are you insane? We just barely escaped that place. It's the only way, she insisted. If we don't end this, they'll never stop. The logic was horrifying but undeniable. Luke took one last look at the approaching horde, their glowing eyes now filling every dark corner of the street. Run, he shouted, leading the way back toward the castle. They sprinted through the town, dodging outstretched hands and twisted grins, their lungs burning with effort. The shadows swelled around them, closing in, whispering their names. As they reached the castle gates, the heavy wooden doors groaned open as if expecting them. Luke hesitated only for a second before plunging inside. The darkness swallowed them whole. The doors slammed shut behind them, and the whispers began again. This time, they were welcoming.